Mornings at the office parking lot were always a battle. Our company had grown too fast, and while they spent millions on executive lounges and catered lunches, they somehow forgot that employees needed a place to park. By 8:30 a.m., every decent spot was taken, leaving stragglers to fight over the scraps like desperate survivors in an apocalyptic wasteland. Today, I was one of those stragglers. I scanned the lot, heart sinking. Row after row of cars. Not a single open space. But then, there it was. The last available spot, squeezed between an old dented Honda and a massive pickup truck that looked like it ran on diesel and bad decisions. Not ideal, but it would do. I turned the wheel and carefully backed into place. Just as I shut off the engine and reached for my coffee, a sharp, angry honk shattered the morning quiet. I glanced in the rearview mirror. A sleek white BMW had pulled up behind me, its driver waving an arm furiously. Oh boy. The window rolled down, revealing a woman who could only be described as a walking embodiment of entitlement. Platinum blonde bob, oversized designer sunglasses, and the kind of expression usually reserved for peasants in medieval times. "You stole my spot," she screeched. I blinked. "Oh, what?" She stabbed a manicured finger toward my car. "I park here every morning. This is my spot." I glanced around at the very public, shared parking lot. No reserved signs. No assigned numbers. Just asphalt and survival of the fittest. "Sorry, but parking's first come, first served," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I got here first." Her lips twisted into a sneer. "Do you even work here?" I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "Yes." "Well, I have important business inside," she snapped. "Unlike you." Ah, there it was. The assumption that she was someone important, and I was just some lowly office grunt taking up space in her world. "Yeah, well," I said, grabbing my coffee, "so do I." Karen's face twisted in rage. Then, to my absolute disbelief, she leaned slightly out of her window and spat at my feet. "You'll regret this," she hissed before slamming her car into reverse and peeling out of the lot. I sighed. Great. Just another Monday. An hour later, I remembered I had left some paperwork in my car. I grabbed my key fob and headed outside, still half distracted by the emails piling up in my inbox. Then I saw it. A long, deep scratch ran across my hood, from headlight to headlight. My stomach dropped. A folded note was tucked under my windshield wiper. I yanked it free, already knowing it wouldn't be good news. The words, scrawled in angry red ink, confirmed my suspicion. "This is too early for you, moron." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. This was targeted. This was personal. And I had a very strong suspicion of who did it. My eyes flicked up toward the security cameras positioned at the edge of the lot. If someone thought he could get away with this, he was in for a rude awakening. I made a beeline for the security office, where Ray, the lot's veteran security guard, was sipping his coffee. "Hey," I said, holding up the note. "Someone keyed my car this morning. Think we can check the footage?" Ray's eyebrows shot up. "Damn, that's messed up. Let's take a look." He turned to his monitor and rewound the feed from the last hour. We sat in silence as the footage played at double speed, until suddenly, Ray muttered, "Well, would you look at that?" There she was, Karen, strutting across the lot in her designer heels, looking over her shoulder twice before pulling a key from her purse. The video captured everything. The slow, deliberate motion as she dragged the key across my hood. The smug little smirk on her face as she placed the note. Ray let out a low whistle. "She went all in, huh?" I clenched my jaw. "Yep." "You want me to call it in?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Not yet. I'm a little busy now." Not because I was letting it go. Oh no. I just had business to handle first. I snapped a picture of the screen, my mind already formulating a plan. Back in the office, my manager flagged me down. "Hey, we've got a candidate coming in for an interview. You free to sit in?" I nodded, still mentally replaying the security footage. "Sure. Who's the applicant?" He checked his notes. "Some woman named Karen. Last name's irrelevant. She claims she's highly experienced, but already sounded kind of demanding over email." I stopped. My lips curled into a slow smile. "No freaking way." "Yeah," I said, my tone neutral. I'll sit in. We walked into the conference room. The moment I stepped inside, I froze, just for a second. Because there she was, sitting across the table, clutching a resume. Same platinum bob, same oversized sunglasses now perched atop her head. She hadn't noticed me yet. She sighed dramatically, as if she was already unimpressed by us. Clutching a resume, she barely looked up before launching into a monologue. I hope you people are competent, she huffed. I'm used to high standards, and frankly, my morning was ruined by some idiot in the parking lot. I slid into my seat, fighting the grin threatening to spread across my face. Really? I said, keeping my voice even. That's unfortunate. Karen let out an exaggerated sigh, flipping through her resume like this whole process was beneath her. Then she looked up and froze. I saw the exact moment recognition dawned. Her expression flickered, arrogance melting into shock. The color drained from her face. I didn't say a word about it. I just pulled out my phone and started texting. Karen's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her resume. She had no idea what was coming next. Karen sat there, clutching her resume like a lifeline, her fingers twitching at the edges of the paper. Her entire demeanor had changed in an instant. Gone was the smug arrogance. In its place, pure, unfiltered panic. I didn't acknowledge her recognition. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, my expression carefully neutral, as if this was just another routine interview. My manager, blissfully unaware of the nuclear tension in the room, cleared his throat and smiled. So, Karen, he began, why don't you start by telling us a little about your previous experience? Karen hesitated for half a second too long. I could practically see the gears grinding in her head. She was stuck in a loop. Acknowledging me meant facing the consequences of what she had done. Pretending not to recognize me meant risking that I'd say something first. She forced a bright, artificial smile. Of course, she chirped, her voice just a little too high-pitched. Well, I've worked in high-level corporate environments for years. I have extensive experience in leadership, project management, and maintaining professionalism in high-stress situations. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Professionalism? Yeah, sure. Nothing says professional like vandalizing someone's car out of spite. I tilted my head. That's great to hear, I said smoothly. Could you give us an example of a time you handled a difficult situation professionally? Her eye twitched. Well, she said, trying to regain composure. I once had to mediate a workplace conflict between two employees who, disagreed over parking arrangements. Oh, she was trying so hard to play it cool. But she couldn't even look at me now. I nodded slowly, pretending to take notes. Interesting. And how did you resolve that conflict? Karen swallowed. I de-escalated the situation and ensured that workplace policies were followed. Lady, you literally spit at my feet this morning and scratched my car like a rabid raccoon. I could feel the tension rolling off of her in waves. She kept shifting in her seat, gripping the resume tighter like it might shield her from what was coming. And the best part? I was dragging this out on purpose. For the next 15 minutes, I made her suffer. I asked her every grueling, high-pressure interview question I could think of. Stuff that would normally be straightforward, but when you're already nervous, a nightmare. What's your leadership philosophy? Tell me about a time you failed at something and how you handled it. How do you respond to authority figures in stressful situations? Every time she tried to regain control of the interview, I hit her with another question. And every time I glanced at my phone and tapped out a message, I saw her fingers tighten on the table. Because she had no clue who I was texting. Was I messaging my manager? Security? The police? She had no idea. But I did. After thoroughly marinating her in anxiety, I finally leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. One last thing, I said casually. This morning, something happened in the parking lot. Do you know anything about that? Karen's face drained of all color. A morning? She stammered. Yeah, I said, my tone light. Someone vandalized a vehicle, left a pretty nasty scratch on the hood, and a note. My manager frowned. Wait, someone keyed a car. Yeah, I said, still watching Karen. But fortunately, we have security cameras. Karen let out a high-pitched, nervous chuckle. I I don't know anything about that. I mean, people are crazy these days. Maybe it was just a random act of vandalism. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. A still image from the security footage filled the display. It was a perfect shot. Karen, standing next to my car, her key pressed to the hood, her face twisted into a smug little smirk. Karen's breath hitched. She gasped. I tilted my phone slightly so my manager could see. His eyebrows shot up. Wait, he said slowly. Karen, this is you. Karen let out a strangled laugh. And no. I mean, yes, but no. It wasn't. It was a joke. I leaned back. A joke? She nodded frantically. Yes. I wasn't really trying to damage it. It was just stress. I wasn't thinking. My manager's expression turned to stone. So let me get this straight. You vandalized an employee's car and then showed up to an interview at the same company. Karen looked between us, eyes darting around for an escape route. I can pay for the damages. I swear. I exhaled, shaking my head. Too late for that. A knock at the door made her flinch. The office assistant poked her head in. Security's here. Karen's breath caught in her throat. Wait, what? I stood up and smoothed my shirt. Yeah, I figured you might try to weasel out of this. So I called them when the interview started. Karen's entire body stiffened. You set me up? I shrugged. Karma works fast. The security officer stepped in. Karen Whitaker? You need to come with us. Karen let out a panicked whimper. I know. This isn't. You can't. The officer gestured toward the door. Let's go. Karen turned to my manager, her hands clasped together. Please. This is all a misunderstanding. I was just stressed. You have to understand. My manager stared at her with pure disbelief. Then, without a word, he reached across the table, picked up her resume, and dropped it into the trash. Karen let out a strangled gasp. Good luck with your future endeavors, I said smoothly. The security officer escorted her out, her pleas turning into garbled sobs. As soon as the door shut behind her, the office erupted into applause. My manager shook his head in amazement. That was incredible. The assistant grinned. Best candidate selection ever. I just smiled, taking a sip of my coffee. Justice tastes better than caffeine. My manager ran a hand down his face, still trying to process everything. He gestured toward the door Karen had just been hauled out of. I don't even know what to say. She vandalized your car and thought she could get hired here. I shrugged. Entitlement is a hell of a drug. He let out a low whistle. Well, that's one way to start a Monday. Speaking of which, I said, standing up, I should go deal with the police report. Security's probably giving them the footage now. My manager gave me a nod. Take your time. And he pointed to the trash can, where Karen's resume was now buried under a pile of crumpled papers. Safe to say she's not getting a call back. I smirked. Yeah, I figured. With that, I grabbed my phone and headed down to security. By the time I got there, Karen was already standing outside the building, flanked by 2 security guards. A cop was speaking with her while she gestured wildly, probably trying to spin some sob story about how she was the real victim. I knocked on the security office door, and Ray waved me in. Hey man, just sent the footage over to the cops. Looks like they're gonna press charges. I exhaled, relief washing over me. Good. She deserves it. Ray grinned. Gotta say, this is the first time I've seen someone ruin their own job interview before it even started. I snorted. Yeah, she's got a real talent for self-destruction. A few minutes later, the officer outside came in and handed me a case number. She's getting charged with vandalism, he said. You'll be notified if it goes to court. Do you want to press for restitution for the damages? Absolutely. The officer nodded. All right. If you have any issues with insurance, let us know. But with the footage we have, this should be open and shut. I thanked him, then stepped outside just in time to see Karen's BMW getting towed. She was losing everything today. Karen was standing off to the side, still trying to negotiate with the officer. Her face was blotchy, mascara running down her cheeks. You don't understand, she was whining. I was just stressed. He provoked me. He stole my parking spot. The officer sighed. Ma'am, there are no assigned spots in that lot. And even if there were, keying a car is a criminal offense. Karen stomped her foot. But it was just a joke. The cop gave her a flat look. Ma'am, a joke doesn't result in felony property damage. I couldn't help myself. I leaned against the doorway and sipped my coffee as she completely unraveled. Then her eyes landed on me. Her expression twisted into pure hatred. You, she screeched, lunging toward me. The security guards immediately stepped in, blocking her path. You set me up, she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. You did this on purpose. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I made you key my car. Sounds logical. Her eyes blazed. You're a nobody. You hear me? A nobody. I don't deserve this. I smirked. Well, Karen, you did this to yourself. Maybe next time, don't commit a crime right before a job interview. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then, as if realizing she had no more cards left to play, she let out a guttural scream, turned, and stomped away. The cop sighed, shaking his head. I've had some real weird ones, but she might take the cake. I chuckled. Yeah, she's a special kind of disaster. I watched as Karen stormed toward her car, only to realize it was on the tow truck, ready to be hauled away. She stopped dead in her tracks. Wait, that's my car. The tow truck driver, a guy who looked like he'd seen every type of crazy imaginable, just smirked. Not anymore, lady. Unpaid tickets caught up with you. Karen completely lost it. Screaming, crying, flailing her arms like a toddler denied candy at the store. The officer just rubbed his temples. God, I need a coffee. As I walked back inside, the office assistant caught my arm. You have to tell us what happened. I smirked. Long story short, karma moves faster than a BMW. By lunchtime, the whole office knew. People were cackling in the break room. The IT guy even pulled up the security footage and watched Karen's meltdown on repeat. Man, he said, shaking his head. This is better than reality TV. I grinned, glad to provide entertainment. As I went back to my desk, I got a text from an unknown number. Karen, you ruined my life. I hope you're happy, you pathetic little loser. I smiled. Then I typed back. Actions have consequences. Have a nice day, Karen. Blocked. I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of my victory coffee, and got back to work. Just another Monday in corporate work. The next morning, I walked into the office with a sense of deep, satisfying victory. My car was still scratched, sure, but knowing Karen was probably crying herself to sleep in a BMW-less, jobless existence made it all worth it. Or so I thought. Because Karen? She wasn't done yet. I was halfway through my first coffee when my manager appeared at my desk, looking annoyed. Did you hear about the front desk situation? He asked. I frowned. No. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Karen's in the lobby. I nearly choked on my coffee. Are you serious? Dead serious, he said. She's demanding to speak to HR. I grinned. Well, that's one way to start the morning. My manager did not look amused. She's saying she was unfairly disqualified from the hiring process and that she wants to file a complaint. I let out a low whistle. Wow. You almost have to admire the sheer delusion. He sighed. HR is dealing with her, but I thought you should know. She might try something stupid. I took another sip of coffee. Karen's entire existence is something stupid. But thanks for the heads up. Curiosity got the better of me. A few minutes later, I made my way down to the lobby, pretending I had business with the front desk. And there she was. Karen stood at the reception counter, red-faced and furious, her voice echoing through the lobby. I want to speak to the CEO, she snapped. This is unacceptable. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman named Denise, barely looked up. Ma'am, for the third time, you don't work here. You can't file an HR complaint. But I should work here. Karen shrieked. I was perfectly qualified. This is workplace discrimination. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Discrimination? Lady, you committed a crime before your interview. Denise, clearly at the end of her patience, just gestured to the security guard standing nearby. Ma'am, the guard said, stepping forward. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Karen whipped around to face him. You can't do that. I have rights. Yeah, Denise muttered. And we have security cameras. Karen's head snapped toward me. The moment she saw me standing there, calm, coffee in hand, her entire face contorted. You, she shrieked. I raised an eyebrow. Me? You're the reason I lost my job, she hissed. You never had the job, I corrected. You lost the interview by committing a felony in the parking lot. Karen trembled with rage. You set me up, I sighed. Karen, do you ever listen to yourself? You ruined my life, she shouted. And now I'm going to ruin yours. The entire lobby went silent. Denise sighed, picking up the phone. Yeah, we're going to need a second security officer down here. Karen completely lost it. This is a miscarriage of justice, she screamed. I was having a bad day. I was stressed. That's not a crime. The security guard gave her a look. Actually, ma'am, vandalism is a crime. Karen let out a high-pitched screech. I'll sue you all. At that exact moment, the second security officer arrived. This guy was twice the size of the first one and looked 1000% done with life. Ma'am, he said, in the slow, exhausted voice of someone who had seen it all, you can leave voluntarily, or we can escort you out. Karen's eyes darted between them. She opened her mouth, probably to scream some nonsense about her rights, but then she seemed to realize something. She was outnumbered, and no one was on her side. Her breathing turned ragged, and her lip trembled. You're all going to regret this, she whispered. Then, in a final act of Karen insanity, she grabbed the receptionist's stapler and hurled it across the room. It missed everyone, clattering harmlessly against the floor. But that was assault. All right, the second security guy said, pulling out his radio. That's enough. Karen screamed as they grabbed her arms. This is police brutality. Denise rolled her eyes. Ma'am, they're not the police. Karen wailed as they dragged her toward the exit. I'll sue. I'll have you all fired. I'll. The doors shut behind her. Silence. A moment later, Denise muttered, Welp. That was dramatic. I took a long sip of coffee, even for a Karen. Later that afternoon, I got a call from the police. We just arrested your vandalism suspect, the officer said. I blinked. Wait, what? The cop chuckled. Yeah, after she got escorted off your company's property, she went across the street and threw a coffee at a barista. Cops were called. And, well, let's just say she didn't handle it well. I burst out laughing. Anyway, the cop continued. With her prior record, she's looking at some real charges now. Just thought you'd want to know. I grinned. Oh, officer, you just made my day. By the next morning, Karen was the talk of the entire office. IT guy had compiled the greatest hits from the security footage into a Karen meltdown supercut, complete with dramatic zoom-ins. Someone had even added captions like, Behold, the fall of a Karen. It was beautiful. My manager, meanwhile, just shook his head. I cannot believe she came back. Karen never knows when to quit, I said. And then, just for fun, I pulled out my phone and typed out one last message to Karen's number. Unblocked. Me. Actions have consequences. Blocked. Again. With that, I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of coffee, and smiled. Justice had been served. Again. Karen's arrest spread through the office like wildfire. And of course, how she'd finally gone full feral raccoon and got herself arrested for throwing coffee at a barista. I swear, by the afternoon, half the company was whispering about it like it was some legendary office folklore. Even the CEO caught wind of it. I was in the break room, refilling my coffee, when he walked in. I'd only ever seen him in company-wide meetings, but now he was standing next to me, stirring sugar into his mug like a regular mortal. You're the guy with the parking lot situation, right? He asked. I blinked. Yeah. He smirked. That's some incredible judgment of character. You should consider joining HR. I laughed. I think I'll stick to my department. Less chance of getting a coffee mug thrown at me. He chuckled, clapped me on the shoulder, and walked off. It was official. Karen had become a corporate cautionary tale. A few days later, I got a call from the detective handling Karen's case. So, he said, good news. Karen pled guilty to the vandalism charge. I raised an eyebrow. Seriously? No courtroom meltdown? No, I'll see you in court speech. Nah, the detective chuckled. I think her lawyer convinced her that fighting a case with security footage, multiple witnesses, and a history of unpaid tickets wasn't the best strategy. I grinned. Smartest decision she's made all week. Yep. She's paying for the damage to your car as part of her deal, so expect a check soon. Oh, this just kept getting better. Anything else? I asked. Well, after her barista assault, she picked up an additional charge for disorderly conduct, he added. But that's a separate case. Of course it is, I muttered. Anyway, just wanted to let you know. Justice is served. I hung up, shaking my head in disbelief. Karen had actually gotten what she deserved. A few weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. I opened it up and immediately recognized the shaky, barely legible handwriting. It was from Karen. The letter read, I hope you're happy. Because of you, I lost my car, my job, and I have a criminal record now. You ruined my life over a parking spot. I hope you can live with yourself. You are a terrible person. I stared at it for a second. Then, slowly, I smiled. This woman had learned absolutely nothing. I grabbed a pen and a sticky note, scribbled a single sentence, and sent it back to the return address Karen had been too dumb to leave off. Actions have consequences. Months passed. Karen faded into the past, just a bad memory with a permanent criminal record. My car got repaired, paid for entirely by Karen's restitution check. The office still occasionally joked about it. Karen had become an urban legend. IT guy even printed out a picture of her security footage still and stuck it on the break room fridge with the caption, "Thou shalt not key cars before job interviews." Life went back to normal. And every single time I pulled into the office parking lot, I parked in that same exact spot, just because I could. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.